If Jesus isn't God, then Christianity falls apart. The cross, meaningless. Salvation, powerless. Faith, built on a lie. But if Jesus is God, then everything he said is the truth. Then everything that he did is enough. And everything that he promised is guaranteed. So let's be real. Is Jesus actually God? Or did the Christians just make it all up? Welcome to Gospel Grounded, where we help believers grow from spiritual milk to spiritual meat. My name is Webster, and I have the blessing, the honor, and the privilege of being your host for as long as God will bless this ministry. Today, we are wrestling with one of the most important questions of human history. Did Jesus really claim to be God? Because if he didn't, then us as Christians, you and I, we should stop worshiping him. But if he did, then he's not just a good teacher, he's not just a prophet, he's not just an influencer from ancient Israel. He is God, and your entire eternity depends on how you respond to that. Now, you've probably heard people say things before, like, well, Jesus never actually said the exact words, "I am God." Or wasn't Jesus just a prophet or a moral teacher? And some people say, well, didn't the church just invent his divinity later? Let's take a closer look. Not at opinions, but at Jesus' own words and actions. Let's start with John 8, verse 58. Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." Jesus didn't say here, "I existed before Abraham." No, he used God's divine name, I am. This is the exact same name that God gave to Moses in Exodus 3:14 when Moses said, "Whom shall I say sent me?" And how did the crowd respond? In verse 59, we read that they picked up stones to unalive him. Why? Because they knew exactly what he was claiming. They knew that Jesus was saying, "I am God." Or what about Mark chapter 2 verses 5 through 7 when Jesus is healing a paralyzed man and he says, "Son, your sins are forgiven." The religious leaders, they said, "Why does this man speak blasphemies like this? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" And look, they were right to react like this. I mean, think about it. If I punch you and someone else walks up and says, "I forgive you," that makes no sense at all, because sin is ultimately against God, so only God can forgive it, unless of course Jesus is God. Now let's jump to John 20 verse 28. By now Jesus has risen. Thomas doubted him, but then he falls at Jesus' feet once he sees the risen Jesus, and he says, "My Lord and my God." Notice what happens next. Jesus doesn't actually correct him. You see, angels, they refuse worship. Apostles refuse worship. But Jesus received it. And just in case you're missing the point here, let's look at John 1 verses 1 through 3. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He," notice it says he, not it, "was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made." Colossians 1:16 drives this home a little more. It says, "For by him all things were created, that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him." So what's the point here? Jesus is not a created thing. He is not a created person. Jesus is the creator. Jesus is God. At this point, you might be like, okay, but that's all Bible. What do the smart people say? I love what C.S. Lewis says. He says that Jesus is either a liar, he's a lunatic, or he's the Lord. But one thing he can't be is just a good moral teacher. But what about how Athanasius quite beautifully puts the divinity and the humanity of Christ? He says, if Christ were not God, he could not save us. But if he were not a man, he could not reach us. Then we got Charles Spurgeon for the home run. Jesus, he's either everything he claimed to be, or he's nothing at all. The smart people, they're smart. They're not wrong. This isn't theory. This is everything. Look at Philippians 2 verses 6 through 8, which says, who being in the very nature God, speaking about Jesus, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. My friend, God doesn't stay distant. He didn't stay distant. He stepped into our skin. He ate our food. He walked on our dirt, and he died our death. Christianity, it's not just good advice. It's good news. It's the news that God came for us. So if Jesus is God, then you need to ask yourself whether or not you believe it. You need to ask yourself that question because your entire eternity depends on it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. But either way, there's another question that really does need our attention. And that's this. Was Jesus really always God's plan, or was he just kind of this last minute rescue mission after humanity, quite frankly, messed everything up? In other words, I'll put it like this. Was Jesus plan B, or was he plan A before the foundations of the world? That's what we're going to talk about in our next video. Subscribe so you don't miss out. God bless you.